Chad, you've worked your butt off on this. Kudos to you, Chad, because I remember when you had the world's longest mission statement I've ever read. I couldn't remember a thing of it. And simultaneously, PDA had core values that were so long, and I was like, I can't even remember them. We've done the work. And I'm glad that Joanne brought you through this exercise, and you've taken it and run with it. And then you just put it on fire with using color theory. Hello. Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Regan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in. Welcome to Everyday Practices, a dental podcast. I am your host, Regan Robertson, and today I'm here to interview my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson. Chad, how are you doing today?
Hello, everyone. It's great being a guest on this episode of the podcast that I host with you. I'm doing great.
Core values.
That's right.
We know we need them. We know
you have them whether you define them or not.
They do exist just like a culture.
Right.
So why don't they work? And what can we do to fix them?
Well, we have a plurality of people, and that also makes it difficult to make sure that everyone's on the same page, because when you have more than one person and you have more than one agenda, because everyone kind of, when they go to work, they've got their own agenda. So it helps reset what the team's agenda is. I don't know. That's my off the cuff answer. What's your thoughts?
I think I agree with that. And as team comes in and then team departs, you have what is known as intellectual property. And I think of core values as intellectual property, meaning it's not a hand drill. It's abstract. It's a thought. It's an idea. It is your core values. So as team members depart and new team members come in, is that something that is communicated? Is it something that sits in a handbook and you see it once? I think there's a lot of consistency that can get lost. And so you may have done the workshop for the core values at some event somewhere, or had a consultant come in or read a book and done it at one point, but did you carry it through in a consistent manner where you know it shows up today?
Yeah. And so we've been implementing for the last year our core values. It started with our leadership team discussing what those were and consolidating and figuring out. What's interesting about ours, Regan, is that ours spells a core. That's it. So there's 5 of them that we have. It's attentive, compassionate, optimistic, reliable, and efficient. And those core values, my PDA coach, Joanne, has been working with me on implementing those into also making it a bigger deal where we, as a team, make a code of ethics of taking those values and then applying different behaviors that exemplify what that looks like. So, and then we are going to showcase those. And my marketing guy, Dean, has also been making a graphic that is actually very Disney-esque, in that I found one on images.google.com of Disney's core values, and that they had it graphically laid out. And when I went down to Disney and did their behind the scenes tour, then we were shown how they kind of color coordinate their core values, and they exemplify that through their behind the scenes, scenery. I don't know what you call it. Like when you're walking up the stairs, if blue was safety, for example, the blue on the stair on the vertical part, it's got blue keys that say this is a key, our core value, one of the keys to Disney, and it would have different safety things as you're going up the stairs and stuff like that. So they really try and, embed that into the tapestry of the behind the scenes culture that we don't see out on the street in Disney.
Do you plan on using color psychology in your practice to anchor your core values?
Yes. And we're getting there. And then that also is going to go on a screensaver so patients can see it. And that I think was going to help hold us more accountable too.
That is fantastic. So I caught attentive, compassionate, and
Yes.
efficient. So what are the other ones? It's a core,
Optimistic,
optimistic.
optimistic, and reliable. And I swear we did not choose those to make the word core, but it was cool afterwards. I was like, do you realize that we almost spelled core? It's like a core value, a core, 5 core values that we chose.
So when did you put these into play? You said, was it earlier this year?
Uh, yes, I want to say about a year ago. So let's say, a full year, but yes, so 12, 13 months from ago, something like that.
How do you measure these core values in each team member right now?
Okay, that was interesting because Joanne said, how do you know that these core values are happening? And I didn't really have a good answer. And,
Mhm.
it's kind of tough because in my mind, my only good answer was qualitatively.
Right.
But she recommended, and we started doing this when we're hiring new people, which there has been a lot of turnover with COVID stuff,
Mhm.
is saying, here are our core values, and what we stand for. Do you think you could align with these, and stuff like that? So we're actually using it in the interview process. Give me an example of how you are compassionate. Give us an example of when someone's optimistic, how value that, or it doesn't have to be you or whatever. So we're trying to use those core values to figure out, are you in alignment with us before we begin?
Is this something that you carry forth in your performance reviews?
Well, yes, but I don't really do those. My office manager Sally does. So I wouldn't be the firsthand person to explain those, but that would be a really good thing to follow up on, is, like, how are we implementing that? We discuss this at each of our quarterly meetings too. We haven't quite discussed them on our monthly meetings, but we even, Joanne had us do this because we had a fun day down in Kansas City. We went to Great Wolf Lodge and, as a team, and we put up on, big marker board stuff, the 5 core values. And all right, so give us examples of how someone's attentive, give us an example of how someone isn't attentive. And then we went through and chose, which ones were our favorite ones. And those are becoming what is our code of ethics. So I'm sure it's just semantics for some people, but the core values are, the key words.
Mhm.
And then the code of ethics more is getting into the weeds of giving examples of specific behaviors that people employ to show that they're attentive.
S-
You know,
I like where you're going with this because one of the questions I was going to ask is how do you define compassion? Like how does that
yes,
show up in the practice? So tell me your code of ethics, because that's, I think, giving me clues as to the behaviors that you want your team members to embody that will create that core value
yep.
experience.
So under compassionate, we had the top 3 were being a good listener, understanding a person's fear or situation, being mindful of what's best for the patient. So those were 3 of our best compassionate examples. We had other ones, being patient. Um, we wrote even, discussing financing, touching people to make them feel like they are welcome and heard, explaining each object and each step to the patient, greeting people by name and introducing yourself if necessary, explaining our out of network status, diplomacy, and de-escalating situations. Those were examples of, that we thought of as compassion.
So can you see how exciting this is for Sally as she is the owner, if you will, of the performance reviews for team.
She's our
Now she
HR.
has,
Yes.
right, tangible behaviors that the team could actually take to Sally and say, here is an example of when I was actively listening to a patient, I was practicing compassion
Yes.
in this instance. Or if I'm tasked with de-escalating a situation, maybe that went great or maybe it didn't, but it could be a very easy way to manage a team member to it. We
Yes.
want to be compassionate. Underneath compassionate is this characteristic and this behavior. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Has Sally given you any feedback so far on how her interpretation of how the code of ethics and core values has been showing up in the practice? Has she noticed any change yet?
Sally No, we don't really sit down and say, well, the day is done. Let's go through the core values. And we haven't quite done that. Right. But on our free time, it's interesting. We'll be like, wow, Dean was really optimistic today and that was manifested when he did this and that. And it's kind of a cool way that we can, boost each other up and stuff like that. Do we do it every day? No, but every couple of weeks you'll see someone make a comment on that.
I think it's that old adage, you get what you focus on, and it can
Yes.
snowball positively, in the right direction or negatively, depending on what you're looking at. PDA, we just went through this entire exercise. Also, we used to have an acronym for our values, and it spelled out tribe. I had the
Yeah.
hardest time getting everybody to memorize what each word was. And then it was even more difficult to figure out how to put behaviors to it. So it spelled out tribe, and it was trust, relationship. I think it was integrity, or we integrated solutions.
That
Even
sounds right.
I have a problem, chief communications officer here. I still kind of like had issues, with each individual word we were choosing. But how did you define that? And it sort of like laid flat there. So it reminded me of like the motivational teamwork posters that you see up in like episodes of The Office. It was very flat and it was very one dimensional. So when PDA, we went through and redid the exercise, we have one core value, just one. And it's professionalism. And darn it, if I tell you, 100% of this company knows exactly what the core value of it is. And there are 3 supporting behaviors that sit underneath it. And I'm sharing this with you, Chad, because I am validating we're seeing the exact same thing. We don't talk about it every day, but these behaviors are showing up, and our managers can manage to these behaviors. And so the first one under professionalism is being knowledgeable. We have to be very knowledgeable about the subject that we specifically are engaged in. 2, genuinely caring. We have to genuinely care about our clients and the patients that they care for. And the third is responsive.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 behaviors keep showing up over and over again. And I think it is a wonderful way to bring our core value to life.
Yep.
And so it's very interesting to me. So you did it in a little bit different way, but very similar. You identified what the values were, and then you put a code of ethics with it.
Well, and I'll admit, I never would have got to that if it weren't for Joanne, saying, all right, now we need to take it a step further. And I was like, I mean, I'm not against it, because so far, even talking the code of ethics has been beneficial. So if we dig deeper into it, I can't imagine it hurting. So this has helped our culture.
So for the listeners, Joanne, who is Joanne to you?
Oh yeah, well, a couple minutes ago I mentioned so she's my coach through Productive Dentist Academy. Mm-hmm. So, and what's cool is, I mean, this just happens to be the case, but I live here in Des Moines. She's in Kansas City. It's really just a 2.5 hour ish drive to get here. So, and she's always a phone call or email away. So it's not that. I mean, but it is nice to be able to be in contact with her. So we run, a Zoom call occasionally. It's right now, for example, once a month, that we do a business review, talking about how things are going. And this has been a majority of our discussion the last 2 or 3 months.
So I'm going to tell you how I quantify the value of core values. And I want to hear if you do the same. There's 2 ways that I look at it.
Okay.
So one, I look at it for team hiring, attraction, and retention.
Yes.
Like attracts like. And then the second way that I look at the value of core values is marketing message outward. So just like we're attracting team members that we want to retain that can vibrate on that same energy of the core values that we embody, I also am looking forward to resonating with that message kind of out in the market and hoping that that reflects back so that we know we are living our core values. So for example, Chad, if I were to pop up your Google reviews, I would want to hear, which by the way, listeners, Veranda Dentistry, Google it. He always has great reviews. When I do look always. Right. When I look at that, I'm going to want to look for examples of how you defined compassion. The team really took time to listen to me. And listener, right. Yeah, Sally greeted me by name. She makes me feel like I'm, like she really knows me very well the minute that I walk in the door. Those types of comments I would be looking for. So that's how I quantify the value of core values. How do you quantify the value of core values?
Well, it's interesting that that's an integrity thing, that the outcome would showcase the input. So the input is these core values. And I don't know if I'm using the right terms, but like that's the front end of it, is defining it. And yes, we've actually put it into our uh, job, what do you call it, like help wanted ads. I don't know, but yeah, our help wanted ad stuff, where we've said, here are our core values. And I have an associate that is coming to work for me starting this spring. And when we were emailing back and forth just casually, I said, hey, I just thought I'd share with you, here are our core values, here's what we stand for, and here's what we're about. And she wrote back and was just like, you know what, I think that is the right place for me. It was really cool because it resonated well with her, that I think just because we were able to define it, because who's against compassion, right? I mean, no one's against compassion, but to be able to identify that we hold compassion as one of our values, and to be able to say that, and to say we've been purposeful and intentional about thinking what is important to us. I mean, not everyone says that optimism is important to them, or reliability or efficiency. I mean, those who doesn't want something to be efficient, sure, but to be able to define that as a core value. And I have to admit, Regan, I don't know if I answered your question, but like, yes, it's starting to permeate, and then you do want to see. But I had a really cool aha moment when you said that it should show up in your Google reviews. And I thought, I need to have Dean review our Google reviews and our Facebook reviews, any review. And are those words starting to permeate, and let the team know, hey guys, what we're doing is showing up? Like, that's really cool. I hadn't really thought of it that far. I actually think that the more you dig into it, you'll end up, and I will end up finding ways to mine this more. That there's something
Absolutely.
deeper than just a foot down, and just something deeper than just a 10 feet down.
The level deeper that you've taken it is, I don't personally, I think some people may believe that they're not compassionate, and they may have different reasons for it. But right on the surface, of course I'm a compassionate person, sure I am, but it does get a bit semantical in how you define compassion. And that's the layer that I think you have done the extra work in. You've gone deeper and you've said, here's what it means for us to be compassionate in this environment.
And my tip to the listener that's wanting to employ this into their team is, you don't have to come up with the list. The gold is having your team come up with this list, so that way they have ownership in it. And it goes back to the Disney thing with Penny. Penny, shoot, I wish I could give her a shout out and name dropping now. Penny,
Penny Pan.
Penny
Yeah.
Reed from
Penny Reed.
Yes. And so I met up with her, and we went through the Disney stuff, because she loves Disney, so we did that. And I asked this bigger shot guy, and he was showing us around. He didn't act like a big shot, but everyone knew who he was. I just knew that he was a big shot in Disney, because people would go, oh, hey, Jim or Rick or whatever his name was. And I hate that I don't remember his name, but that, like, people knew who he was. He didn't act like a big shot, but I asked him, I said, so what you're telling me is that then the employees have buy-in? He said, no, ownership. And I just thought it was a cool distinction. He was just like, buy-in is kind of when it's like, all right, we'll play along. Ownership is when it's like, no, we're invested.
I think that this has been a super productive everyday practices dental podcast tip for the week. I think this was fantastic. If I heard you correctly, Chad, which I believe I did, really, listeners, if your core values, if you know you have them, but they're collecting dust somewhere, or maybe you don't have them at all, but you are struggling with some team retention, you're not getting the behaviors you want out of your team, there's really 3 things that you can do right away. First, you got to bring in your team and get buy-in. So you've got to have a session to identify what those core values are, and they need to be a part of that process. 2, you need to communicate them everywhere and manage to them. So I love, Chad, how you said, we're putting it on as the wallpaper on our PC computers.
Yes.
We're going to actually even do some color theory around it so we can reinforce and anchor it visually, communicate it, manage it everywhere. And then 3, make sure that you're supporting those core values with behaviors that you want to see. Define it. Your team needs guidance, and they are not going to all think of compassion in the same way. Just like maybe somebody wouldn't think of professional in the same way. Professional in WWE is not the same as professional in a healthcare setting. So defining that with behaviors you want to see is powerful. Thank you, Chad.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I hope that was advantageous to everyone.
Kudos to you, Chad, because I remember when you had the world's longest mission statement I've ever read. I couldn't remember a thing of it. And simultaneously, PDA had core values that were so long. And I was like, I can't even remember them. We've done the work. And I'm glad that Joanne brought you through this exercise and you've taken it and run with it. And then you just put it on fire with using color theory. Hello.
Yeah.
You
know what? I'd actually, when we get done with it, I'd like to maybe have Dean send it to you to see what you think.
Yes, please. I'm going to Leatrice's class this Saturday, right?
Very cool.
So I will happily look it over for color. All right, everyone. Well, have a wonderful day. We wish you well till we see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Hello, Regan Robertson here from Productive Dentist Academy. Do you ever have that nagging feeling that you deserve more case acceptance, more time with your family, more profit without sacrificing excellent patient care? I have great news for you. You can join your favorite PDA podcast hosts, Dr. Chad Johnson, Dr. Bruce B. Baird, Dr. Victoria Peterson, and myself at a PDA productivity workshop in 2023. This is full immersion CE, where we give you the resources and tools you desire so you can align your team, streamline your systems, and consistently produce more without raising your fees and without more time in the chair. This is the nation's #1 dental business course, and the best part is this program guarantees your dental practice growth. We have 2 events in 2023, March 2nd to the 4th and September 28th to the 30th. Fair warning, these events fill quickly. March is already half full as I record this, so grab your registration today. If you have to have it right now, you can email directly Brent, BRENT, at productivedentist.com to save your seat. And hurry, these events fill fast. Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.